The war was over, but the scars it left on the galaxy ran deep. Planets that had once thrived were now craters of ash. Space stations floated like skeletons among the stars, their lights flickering weakly, as if they were mourning the countless lives lost. The human coalition, once thought weak and disorganized by many alien species, had emerged victorious. Their success was not due to brute force alone, but to determination, intelligence, and a stubborn unwillingness to surrender. Sergeant Daniel Cross sat alone in the cockpit of his shuttle, staring at the void outside. The stars were beautiful tonight, or maybe he only thought so because he had survived to see them again. His uniform was worn and patched in places, the fabric carrying the smell of ozone and sweat. Battle was over, but he still felt its weight, heavy on his shoulders like a stone that would never be lifted. He remembered the last battle vividly. The Zelith Empire's fleet had descended upon the human outpost like a black wave, their ships enormous and terrifying. Daniel and his squad had fought tooth and nail, every breath a struggle, every second a test of courage. And yet here they were. The humans had won, and the Zelith were retreating in defeat. But victory was hollow. Cities lay in ruins, friends had been lost, and the galaxy's future felt uncertain. Daniel was not the kind to celebrate. He had seen too much, experienced too much. Peace, he knew, was just another battlefield, one fought with patience and vigilance. The shuttle hummed softly beneath him as he received a message from the Coalition Command. Sergeant Cross, your new assignment will begin immediately. Report to the administrative deck of the Horizon Star. Instructions and escort details are awaiting you. Daniel sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. Assignments were rarely exciting after the war. Most soldiers were being reassigned to reconstruction teams, to repair the damage humanity had suffered and also inflicted, but this one sounded different. Something about it made his stomach tighten, a mixture of curiosity and unease. When he docked at the Horizon Star, a massive human cruiser converted for administrative and diplomatic purposes, Daniel was greeted by Commander Livia Chen, a stern woman with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through pretense. Sergeant Cross, she said without any ceremony. You have been assigned to a sensitive post. Your charge is unusual. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Unusual how, ma'am? She handed him a datapad. You are to assume responsibility for a Zelith noble, Princess Elira. She is being placed under human guardianship as part of the post-war peace treaty. Your task is to ensure her safety and proper treatment until diplomatic decisions are finalized. Do I make myself clear? Daniel blinked. The word noble and princess carried weight. But Zelith reminded him of the enemy fleet that had nearly wiped out entire colonies. Yes, ma'am, he said, though inside his mind raced. He had expected challenges, perhaps reconstruction, maybe even field duty to quell rogue Zelith loyalists. But this? He had not prepared for that. Commander Chen's expression softened just slightly. Treat her with respect. Do not underestimate her. And remember, the galaxy is watching. Human honor is on display in this mission. Daniel swallowed and nodded. Understood. He was led to the containment wing, a high-security area modified to hold high-value captives. Princess Elira was waiting inside, her posture rigid, her eyes sharp and alert. She was nothing like the humans Daniel had seen before. Her skin shimmered with a faint, silvery glow, her hair fell like liquid night, and her eyes were the color of a calm nebula, beautiful and intimidating at once. She regarded him coolly. So, I am to be watched by the victors, she said in flawless Galactic standard, though her voice carried a melody he had never heard in any human. There was no fear, only pride and subtle defiance. Daniel felt a pang of sympathy. Not for the empire she represented, but for her. She had lost everything, her family, her status, her home. I'm here to make sure you're safe, he said carefully. That's all. Elira's lips curved slightly, not a smile, but something like a challenge. Safe? You think humans understand safety? I've seen your kind destroy worlds. Safety is a fragile word for you. He took a deep breath. She was right, of course. Humans had won, yes, but the price was enormous, and victory came with its own burdens. He didn't argue. Maybe, he said softly. But right now, that's my job. To protect you, not to fight you. Not unless I have to. For a moment there was silence between them. Daniel noticed the small tremor in her hands, barely perceptible, but there. Even a princess could not escape fear entirely. And maybe, he thought, that made her more human than many humans he had met. The shuttle that would take them to the human administrative station on Epsilon Prime was ready. As they boarded, Daniel couldn't help but notice how the Zealith princess observed everything. The machinery, the crew, the stars outside the windows. She was sharp, curious, cautious. Not like someone defeated, more like someone waiting for the right moment to reclaim her place. During the journey, Daniel tried to engage her in conversation, to break the icy silence. "Do you like the stars?" he asked, hoping for some connection. "They are vast," she replied, "indifferent to our struggles. Perhaps that is why they are comforting. They do not judge." Daniel chuckled softly. "I can't say I've ever thought of them that way. To me, they remind me of what we lost. But maybe you're right. Maybe the stars are just stars. Quiet, constant watching, but never interfering." Her gaze softened slightly, just a flicker, and for a moment, Daniel felt a strange connection across the gap between human and alien. Perhaps this was the first step toward something that could heal more than just the war-torn galaxy. By the time they reached Epsilon Prime, a planet still recovering from the war but bustling with reconstruction efforts, Daniel knew his task would be difficult. Alira's presence was a constant reminder of the fragility of peace, of the thin line between trust and conflict. He also knew that how he treated her would not only reflect on him, but on humanity itself. The administrative station was a sprawling complex, gleaming in the artificial sunlight created to simulate Earth-like conditions. Alira was assigned a suite that matched her status, though heavily monitored for security. Daniel's quarters were modest, functional, and deliberately separate. That night, as he lay on the narrow cot, Daniel thought about the future. The galaxy was watching, and so were the Zealith. Every action he took, every word he spoke, would be scrutinized. But for the first time since the war had ended, he felt purpose beyond survival. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a bridge between worlds, a protector of hope in the aftermath of destruction. And somewhere in the depths of that thought, he realized that the challenge ahead was not just about guarding a princess. It was about understanding her, about learning what made her world and her people tick. Because if humanity wanted lasting peace, it could not just be the victors. They had to be wise, patient, and honorable. Alira, in her suite, stared out at the reconstructed city below. She did not yet trust the humans, and she did not yet respect them. But she would watch. She would learn, and perhaps in time, she would see that victory did not always mean cruelty. The war was over, but the real battle for trust, for peace, for understanding was only beginning. The morning sun on Epsilon Prime was pale and artificial, filtered through the giant domes that protected the city from the planet's harsh storms. Even so, it gave the streets below a sense of life returning after the war. Construction crews worked steadily, repairing buildings, clearing rubble, and slowly stitching together the broken city. Daniel Cross walked through the corridors of the administrative station, his uniform crisp but his mind heavy. He had spent the night reviewing his duty protocols and thinking about Princess Alira. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Not just because she was Zealith, but because she radiated a quiet authority that demanded attention. Even in captivity, she carried herself with pride and intelligence. The more he observed her, the more he realized that she was not someone to underestimate. Daniel knocked on the door of her suite and entered after hearing her soft, "Come in." She sat by a window, gazing at the city below. Her silver-tinted skin shimmered faintly in the morning light, and her dark hair fell over her shoulders like liquid night. "Good morning, Princess," Daniel said, keeping his tone respectful but warm. "Are you rested?" Elira did not answer immediately. She tilted her head slightly as if studying him, weighing the sincerity of his words. "Rested? Perhaps," she said finally. "But sleep does not heal the wounds of defeat, Sergeant. I have been stripped of my power, my home, and my family. Rest cannot repair such things." Daniel nodded slowly. He understood that feeling. He had survived battles, yes, but he had lost comrades, friends who would never return. "No," he said softly. "Sleep doesn't erase pain, but it can give you strength to face the day. And today is a new day." Elira's eyes flickered with something he could not name. Interest, maybe, or curiosity. "And what is this new day supposed to bring?" she asked. "More humans telling me how to behave?" "Not at all," Daniel replied. "I'm not here to command you. I'm here to protect you. That's all." She studied him silently, then finally leaned back in her chair, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "Protection, yes. But humans are unpredictable. How can I be sure that your protection does not come at the cost of my freedom?" Daniel took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Because I've seen what freedom and loyalty mean. And I know the value of trust. I will not betray you, Princess. Not because I have to, but because it is the right thing to do." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Elira's lips curved ever so slightly, not a smile but a recognition, as if she acknowledged the truth in his words. "You speak of trust, yet you are human," she said quietly. "And humans destroyed my world. How can trust survive such history?" "Because history is over," Daniel said firmly. "We can't change the past, but we can choose how we act today. We can choose to build something better. That's what I intend to do." Elira did not respond immediately. She turned her gaze to the window again, watching the workers below. The city was alive even after all it had lost, and for the first time since her capture she allowed herself a small thought. Maybe humans were not just conquerors. Maybe they were builders too. The following days were filled with routine, but the tension between them slowly shifted. Daniel made a point to treat Elira with respect, addressing her as a princess, asking for her opinions, and explaining human customs. He did not treat her as a prize or a curiosity, but as a person who had endured great suffering. Elira, in turn, observed him closely. She saw his discipline, his careful attention to duty, and the kindness he showed even to those below him in rank. It was not the strength of an empire, but the quiet strength of humanity itself, resilient, patient, and surprisingly compassionate. One afternoon, Daniel escorted her to a viewing platform overlooking the city's reconstruction. Workers and engineers moved in coordinated patterns, repairing the damage of war. Machines lifted debris, holographic maps guided construction, and teams worked together with precision. "Your people," Elira said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "They rebuild. Even after suffering so much, you continue to repair, to create. My people would have fallen to despair long ago." Daniel shrugged, a small smile on his face. "We have to keep moving forward. That's all we can do. Even if the odds are against us, we try. That's humanity." Elira remained silent for a moment, then asked, "And do humans always try to understand those they have defeated?" "Not always," Daniel admitted. "Some forget. Some only see victory and power. But some choose to learn. That's the difference between surviving and truly living." Her gaze softened again, this time more noticeably. Daniel did not miss it. In that instant, he realized that the barrier between them, years of war, centuries of distrust, was beginning to thin. Respect and understanding were small seeds, but seeds that could grow into something stronger. Later, during dinner in her suite, Elira asked him about human culture. "Do humans value honor above all else?" Honor matters, Daniel said. But not more than compassion. You can be strong and still care for others. That's what makes humans remarkable in my eyes. Elira tilted her head thoughtfully. Compassion, strength. You claim victory, and yet these are the qualities you admire most. Curious indeed. I've seen the alternative, Daniel said. I've seen what happens when power and fear rule. I don't want that for the galaxy. I don't want that for us. The princess considered his words, and for the first time Daniel felt a glimpse of vulnerability in her eyes. She was a warrior, a noble and a survivor, but she had also lost everything. And perhaps in his own way, he had lost much too. Their days fell into a rhythm. Daniel accompanied her on supervised walks through the administrative station, introducing her to human officials and diplomats. They visited reconstruction sites, military academies, and schools where children, both human and alien, were learning to coexist. Everywhere they went, Elira observed, sometimes critically, sometimes with quiet fascination. She began to ask questions, not about tactics, not about war, but about people. Why humans smiled even in hard times, why they helped each other without expecting reward, why they valued small joys as much as great victories. And Daniel answered patiently, sharing stories, explaining traditions, and sometimes just listening when she spoke. Through these exchanges, a subtle bond formed. It was not friendship, not yet, but a connection built on curiosity, respect, and shared understanding. Daniel sensed that she was beginning to see humanity not as conquerors, but as survivors with heart. And Elira, for her part, began to acknowledge that humans were capable of more than destruction. They were capable of hope. One evening, while observing the twin suns of Epsilon Prime setting in the distance, Daniel turned to her. "You're not like I expected," he said quietly. "Not proud, not arrogant. You're strong in a different way. You survive, you observe, you think. That's impressive." Elira's eyes flickered with something unreadable, perhaps amusement, perhaps approval. "And you, human, are not like I expected either. I expected indifference, brutality. Instead, you show patience, you show care. I will remember this, Sergeant Cross." Daniel smiled. It was rare for him to feel hope, but hope was exactly what he felt now. The princess, once a symbol of his enemy, was learning to see humanity through a lens of respect, and perhaps, just perhaps, humanity could learn to understand her as well. As the days turned into weeks, tension gradually gave way to cautious collaboration. Elira began to participate in planning sessions, offering insights from her people's strategies, though carefully filtered to avoid revealing secrets. Daniel continued to serve as her protector, but also as a guide and interpreter of human culture. Peace, he realized, was not just the absence of war, it was the presence of understanding. And in that understanding, a bridge was forming, not just between him and Elira, but between two species that had once been locked in a cycle of hatred and fear. By the end of the second week, Daniel could see small but meaningful changes in the princess. She smiled more often, asked questions, and even showed glimpses of humor, a dry, sharp wit that caught him off guard more than once. And Elira, despite herself, began to acknowledge that humans were not merely brute conquerors. They were builders, thinkers, and above all, survivors. The war was over, but the real challenge, the challenge of trust, understanding, and rebuilding, was only beginning. And for the first time, Daniel believed that together they could face it. The days on Epsilon Prime passed quietly, but beneath the surface, unease was growing. The war had ended, yes, but victory never erased hatred so easily. Small whispers drifted through the corridors of the administrative station. Rumors of zealoth, warlords who refused to surrender, of fleets hiding in the dark edges of space, of loyalists who believed their empire was not truly defeated. Sergeant Daniel Cross felt the tension like a storm waiting to break. He spent every day close to Princess Elira, guarding her, guiding her, and slowly building an unusual bond with her. She was still proud, still cautious, but she had begun to see him not as an enemy, but as a man of honor. That fragile connection gave Daniel hope, but hope could be fragile too. One evening, as Daniel reviewed routine reports in his quarters, he noticed something strange in the communication logs. A transmission had been intercepted from outside the system. The message was encrypted with an old Zelith code, one used by military leaders during the war. Daniel's heart quickened as he read the partial translation. The princess must be freed. The empire is not gone. Prepare for her return. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the words. This was no rumor. It was real. Loyalists were planning to rescue Elira, and if they succeeded, the fragile peace between humans and Zelith could shatter overnight. The next morning, Daniel entered Elira's suite with a heavy expression. She was standing by the window as usual, her gaze fixed on the city below. Princess, he said, his tone careful. I need to ask you something important. She turned to face him, her eyes calm but sharp. What is it, Sergeant? Have you had any contact with your people? Messages? Signals? Her expression stiffened. No. Why do you ask? Daniel studied her face, trying to read her. Because I intercepted a message. From your people. They're planning to rescue you. Elira's eyes widened, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw true conflict there. They would risk everything again? Even after all that has been lost? Daniel nodded grimly. It seems so. And if they succeed, war could start again. Everything we've built here, the peace, the trust, it could be destroyed. Elira walked slowly to the table, her hands trembling slightly. She lowered herself into a chair and stared at nothing for a long moment. Finally, she whispered, I believed my people would not come for me, that my father had abandoned me as part of the treaty, but if loyalists remain... She trailed off, shaking her head. Daniel sat across from her, his voice steady. You have a choice, Princess. If they come for you, will you go with them or will you stay here? Her eyes snapped to his, filled with both fire and doubt. You would ask me to betray my people? I'm asking you to save the galaxy. Daniel replied firmly. If you go with them, they will start another war. More lives will be lost. Human. Zelith. Innocent lives. But if you stay, if you choose peace, maybe we can stop it before it begins. Elira's jaw tightened. She looked away, torn between loyalty to her people and the truth she had begun to see in the humans around her. She had seen their compassion, their resilience, their will to rebuild. And she had seen Daniel's honor, his respect. That night, Elira could not sleep. She paced her suite, torn by the weight of her decision. She remembered the faces of her people, the pride of the Zelith Empire, the promise of glory. But she also remembered the burning worlds, the cries of children, the endless cycle of war. When dawn came, she found Daniel waiting outside her door. His eyes met hers and she spoke quietly. I will not go with them. If they come, I will not return to war. I will not be the spark that destroys what little peace remains. Relief flooded Daniel's chest, but he knew the danger was far from over. Then we must be ready, he said. Over the next days, Daniel doubled security. He assigned additional guards, checked communication systems, and stayed closer to Elira than ever before. Yet he also saw her struggle. The decision she had made weighed heavily on her. She was not betraying her people out of weakness. She was choosing peace out of strength. But it was not an easy strength. One afternoon, as they walked through the reconstruction zone together, Elira stopped suddenly and pointed toward a group of human children playing near the workers. Their laughter rang through the dusty air, bright and pure. Do you see them? She asked softly. Daniel nodded. Yes. They should not have to live in fear of war, she said, almost to herself. I see now. Your people fight not for conquest, but for survival. For the future of children like these. She turned to him, her eyes glistening. Perhaps my people lost not because of your weapons, but because of your hearts. Daniel was silent for a moment, moved by her words. Maybe, he said finally, but maybe we can help each other now. Maybe that's the real victory. That evening, another intercepted message arrived. This time the words were clearer. Strike planned. Epsilon Prime. Soon. Be ready. For the princess. Daniel's blood ran cold. The rebels were coming. The next day he prepared Elira. They will try to take you. They will come with ships, weapons, everything they have left. When they do, you must trust me. Do you trust me, princess? Elira looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. I do. The attack came faster than expected. Rebel ships slipped past the outer defenses, their sleek black hulls cutting through the night sky. Explosions rocked the edges of the city as alarms blared across the administrative station. Soldiers rushed to their posts, civilians scrambled for shelter, and Daniel grabbed his weapon, pulling Elira close. Stay behind me, he ordered, his voice firm but calm. Together they raced through the corridors as the station shook around them. Rebel troops stormed the halls, their armor gleaming with the old sigil of the Zelith Empire. Blaster fire echoed through the air, and Daniel fought with everything he had, determination burning in his chest. He was not just fighting for himself. Now, he was fighting for her. For peace. Elira, unarmed but unbroken, stayed close. She watched as Daniel shielded her, as he refused to let her fall into the hands of those who would use her as a tool of war. And in that moment she saw the truth. Humanity's strength was not just in their weapons, but in their courage to protect what they valued most. The battle raged late into the night. The rebels were relentless, but the coalition forces held firm. Daniel and Elira made it to the command center, where Commander Livia Chen coordinated defenses. Sergeant Cross, she shouted over the chaos, keep the princess safe at all costs. If they take her, the war begins again. Daniel nodded, determination flashing in his eyes. They won't get her. Not while I'm breathing. Elira heard those words, and something shifted inside her. This human, this soldier, was willing to risk everything, not because she was a symbol, but because he believed in peace, in honor, in her. By dawn, the first wave of the rebellion had been repelled, but the threat was far from over. The loyalists would return, stronger, more desperate. The galaxy still teetered on the edge of chaos. Yet something had changed. Elira had made her choice. She would not be their weapon. She would not return to war. And with Daniel by her side, she believed, truly believed, that peace might still be possible. The shadows of rebellion had risen, but so too had the light of hope. The attack on Epsilon Prime had shaken everyone. The rebels had failed to capture Princess Elira, but their determination was clear. They were willing to risk everything for her. The human coalition now faced a grim truth. As long as Elira remained in one place, she would always be a target. Commander Livia Chen summoned Sergeant Daniel Cross to her office. Her expression was sharp, her eyes weary from endless nights of crisis planning. Cross, she said, folding her hands on the table. The rebels will not stop. They will come again stronger. Our intelligence suggests they have sympathizers hidden across nearby systems. Keeping the princess here only endangers Epsilon Prime further. Daniel already knew where this was heading. You want me to move her, he said flatly. Chen nodded. Yes, you'll escort her off-world. A transport ship is waiting. You'll take her through neutral systems, away from obvious targets. If they want her, they'll have to chase you, and we'll use that to break their networks. Daniel hesitated. He had expected to protect the princess here, in the safety of fortified bases and controlled zones. But now she would be exposed, wandering through unstable territories. That's a dangerous gamble, he said. Everything is dangerous. Right now, Chen replied firmly. But you're the one I trust to keep her alive. Don't fail us. Daniel accepted with a nod. He had no choice, and truthfully, he didn't want one. Protecting Elira had become more than just a mission. It was something he felt in his bones, a duty he would never abandon. That night, Daniel explained the plan to Elira. She listened silently, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of her suite. "So," she said at last, "we become prey, running through the galaxy while hunters chase us." "That's one way to see it," Daniel admitted. "But we'll also have a chance. Away from the heart of the coalition, the rebels will reveal themselves, and every time they move against us, we'll learn more about them. It's risky, but it's better than waiting here for them to strike again." Elira tilted her head, regarding him thoughtfully. "And you are willing to risk your life for this?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "I already have. Every day. But yes, I'll risk it again. For you. For peace." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then, for the first time, Elira gave a small, genuine smile. "Then we will face this together, Sergeant Cross." Their transport ship, the Vigilant Star, launched under heavy guard. But once they cleared Epsilon Prime's orbit, Daniel knew they were on their own. The ship was sleek, built for speed more than battle. Its crew was small, just Daniel, Elira, and a handful of trusted operators. The galaxy stretched before them, a vast ocean of stars. Daniel set a course toward neutral, space, uncharted sectors where human and Zelith borders blurred. It was dangerous, but unpredictability was their best defense. At first, Elira moved through the ship with her usual calm detachment. She spoke little, spending most of her time in the observation deck, watching the stars. But slowly, as days passed, she began to ask questions again. "Why do humans build ships like this?" she asked one evening, her voice carrying curiosity instead of challenge. Daniel glanced at the walls of the narrow corridor. "Fast, light, easy to repair. That's how we work. We don't build for beauty. We build for survival." "Efficiency. Over elegance," Elira murmured. "Strange. My people would never build something so plain. Yet I see how it suits you." Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why we survived the war. We don't waste time on what doesn't matter. We focus on what does." Their journey was not without trouble. On the third day, scanners detected a rebel ship trailing them. Daniel ordered evasive maneuvers, weaving through asteroid fields and ion storms. The Vigilant Star trembled under the strain, alarms flashing red, but they escaped. Barely. Elira watched him at the controls, calm and steady, even as danger closed in. She could not help but feel respect growing within her. This human soldier, scarred and weary from war, carried courage like a shield. Not the arrogance of conquest, but the determination of survival. Later, when the danger had passed, she said quietly, "You could have left me behind. If I were captured, your mission would end, but you would live. And yet you risked everything." Daniel looked at her firmly. "Because you're not just cargo, Princess. You're more than that. You're the key to peace. And because you're under my protection, that means something to me." Her heart stirred at those words, though she kept her expression composed. She had grown up in a world where loyalty was often twisted into control, where promises were chains. But Daniel's loyalty was different. It was not forced, it was chosen. And that choice gave it strength. Days turned into weeks as they moved, from system to system. They landed on scarred planets where the wounds of war still bled. On one world, they saw towns rebuilt from rubble, human and alien families working side by side. On another, they saw refugee camps, tents stretching across barren fields filled with those who had lost everything. Elira was shaken by what she witnessed. She had expected humans to treat aliens as conquered people, but instead, she saw compassion. Aid stations shared food, medics tending wounds regardless of species. Humanity's strength was not only in battle, it was in how they cared for others after battle was done. One evening, as they walked through a half-repaired settlement, Elira turned to Daniel. "You fight wars, and then you rebuild not just yourselves but others as well. Why?" Daniel thought for a moment. Because we know what it's like to lose everything, and because peace doesn't last if your neighbors are starving. We don't just want to win, we want to live. Her gaze lingered on him. Slowly she whispered, "Perhaps that is why you won." But the rebels were never far behind. In orbit above the burned world of Calrus 4, they struck again. Sleek, black ships emerged from hyperspace, weapons blazing. The Vigilant Star shuddered. Under the assault, Daniel shouted orders, moving with precision. "Shields to maximum, prepare counterfire." He turned to Alara. "Stay low." The battle was fierce. Explosions lit the void as the small human vessel danced between larger enemy ships. But despite their skill, the rebels pressed harder. Finally, Daniel made the call. "We can't hold them here. We're going planetside. Brace yourself." The ship dived into the atmosphere, flames licking at its hull. It crashed into the barren plains of Calrus 4, skidding across cracked ground before coming to a halt. Smoke rose into the sky, but the ship remained intact enough for shelter. Daniel grabbed his rifle and turned to Alara. "They'll come for us. We hold them here." Alara's eyes flashed with determination. "Then we will stand together." The rebels descended quickly, their armored troops advancing across the plains. Daniel and Alara took cover behind the wreckage. Blaster fire lit the air, scorching metal and stone. Daniel fought fiercely, his aim precise, his movement steady. But what surprised him was Alara. Though unarmed, she used her knowledge of terrain and strategy to guide him. "Move left, there's cover there. Watch the ridge, they're flanking." Her voice was sharp, commanding, the voice of a leader. Together they held the line. Every step the rebels took, Daniel pushed them back. Every tactic they tried, Alara countered with insight. They were no longer soldier and captive. They were partners fighting as one. At last, coalition reinforcements arrived, driving the rebels into retreat. The battlefield fell silent, smoke curling into the cold sky. Daniel lowered his weapon, breathing heavily. He turned to Alara, who stood tall beside him, her eyes fierce with pride. "You fought well," he said sincerely. She met his gaze, and this time, her lips curved into a true smile. "And you fought with honor. Perhaps we are not so different, you and I." For Daniel, the words meant more than any medal or praise. They meant trust. They meant respect. And in that moment, he knew that their journey was more than survival. It was the beginning of something greater. As night fell on Calrus 4, they sat by a small fire outside the damaged ship. The stars stretched overhead, silent witnesses to their struggle. Alara spoke softly, almost as if to herself. "I once believed humans were only destroyers, but now I see differently. You are protectors, builders, and perhaps dreamers." Daniel looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "And I once thought your people were only conquerors, but you've shown me there's more. You chose peace when you could have chosen war. That takes strength." The fire crackled between them, warm in the cold night. For the first time since the war had ended, Daniel felt something he had not dared to hope for. Unity. Not just a ceasefire, not just survival, but the possibility of true understanding. And for the first time, Alara felt that she was not just a captive, not just a princess stripped of her empire. She was part of something new, something that could change the fate of the galaxy. The crash on Calrus 4 had been a close call, but Daniel and Alara had survived. They had fought side by side against the rebels, and in doing so, they had earned each other's respect. Yet both knew that the struggle was far from over. The rebels had grown bold, striking openly at them, and their leader still hid in the shadows, waiting for the chance to finish what had been started. The Vigilant Star was badly damaged. Coalition engineers worked day and night to repair it, while reinforcements scouted the area to ensure the rebels did not return. Daniel, however, could not rest. He paced the broken plains, his rifle always within reach, his mind heavy with thought. Alara noticed his unrest. One evening she approached him as he stood looking at the horizon. "You are troubled," she said softly. Daniel glanced at her. The rebels won't stop. They'll keep coming. And every time, the galaxy suffers. We need to end this for good. Her eyes glowed faintly in the starlight. You mean to strike at their leader? Daniel nodded. Yes. If we cut off the head, the body will fall, but finding him won't be easy. Alira was silent for a moment. Then she spoke with quiet certainty. I know where he hides. Daniel turned sharply toward her. You do? She lowered her gaze. Before my capture, I heard whispers among my father's court. A warlord named Kareth, once a commander in my people's fleets. When the war ended, he refused surrender. He swore vengeance on humans and those of my kind who sought peace. If the rebellion has a heart, it beats with his will, and I know where he would build his stronghold. Daniel's pulse quickened. At last, a chance to end this nightmare. Then we go after him. Elira lifted her chin, her voice steady. Not just you. We. If I appear before him, I may draw him into the open. Together, we can end his war. Daniel studied her for a long moment. He wanted to refuse, to keep her safe far from danger. But he knew she was right. Her presence was the key. Finally, he said, then we'll finish this together. Repairs on the Vigilant Star were completed within days. With a fresh crew of volunteers, Daniel and Elira set out once more, this time not as fugitives, but as hunters. Their destination, a distant world on the edge of known space, once a Zealoth fortress, now rumored to be the heart of the rebellion. The journey was tense. Every hour they expected ambush. Every system they passed felt heavy with unseen eyes. But no attack came. It was as though the rebels were waiting, daring them to arrive. At last the ship dropped out of hyperspace above the planet Torvan. Below stretched jagged mountains and dark skies, lightning flashing across storms that never ceased. At the center of those storms rose a fortress of black metal, carved into the cliffs, a relic of war, now alive again with the glow of weapons. Daniel stared at it grimly. That's it. Elira's voice was calm, but her eyes narrowed. Yes, Kareth waits there. The Vigilant Star descended through the storm, its shield straining against the violent winds. Rebel ships rose to intercept, but this time, coalition reinforcements jumped in behind Daniel's vessel. The sky above, Torvan exploded into battle, lasers tearing through the dark clouds, ships burning and falling into the storms below. Daniel led the strike team to the surface. Elira walked beside him, her cloak snapping in the wind, her presence regal and unyielding. Together they marched into the fortress. Inside, the halls were vast and cold, lined with alien carvings of conquest. Rebel soldiers rushed to meet them, but Daniel and his team cut through the resistance with precision. Elira did not flinch. She moved through the chaos with quiet strength, guiding them deeper. At last, they reached the central chamber. There, waiting on a throne of jagged stone, was Kareth. He was massive, taller than any human, his armor dark and scarred, his eyes burning with fury. His voice echoed through the hall. So the lost princess comes crawling back, and with a human at her side. How far you have fallen, Elira. Elira stood tall, unshaken. You dishonor our people, Kareth. The war is over. My father chose peace, but you cling to hatred. Kareth rose from his throne, towering over them. Peace? No, it is surrender. The humans should kneel before us, not walk beside us. And you, daughter of a king, you should be the blade of our revenge, not its weakness. Daniel stepped forward, rifle raised. This ends today, Kareth. No more attacks, no more innocent lives lost. Your rebellion dies here. The warlord laughed, a sound like thunder. Human words mean nothing to me. Let strength decide. With a roar, he charged. The battle was fierce. Kareth swung a massive blade that could cleave steel. Daniel dodged, firing burst from his rifle, but the warlord's armor deflected much of the fire. Sparks filled the chamber as blade met blast. Elira stood at the edge, her eyes burning with resolve. She shouted commands, directing Daniel toward weak points in the warlord's stance. Left side, his guard drops there. Daniel followed her voice, moving with precision. He rolled aside as Kareth's blade smashed into stone, then fired into the exposed joint of the warlord's armor. Kareth roared in pain, staggering. Still, he fought on, relentless. His strikes forced Daniel back step by step until his back hit the wall. At that moment, Elira stepped forward. Her voice rang through the hall, sharp and commanding. "Kareth, look at me. You claim to fight for our people, but you fight only for yourself. You call me weak, yet I stand here unbroken beside the human you hate. That is strength you will never have." For a heartbeat, Kareth faltered, his rage clashing with doubt. Daniel seized the chance. With a final surge, he struck, blasting through the warlord's chestplate. Kareth staggered, dropped his blade, and fell to his knees. His last words were a snarl. "This is not the end." Then he collapsed, the fire in his eyes extinguished. Silence filled the chamber. The rebellion's leader was dead. Around them, the sounds of battle faded as news spread through the fortress. Without Kareth's will driving them, the rebels faltered, their fight crumbling into surrender. Daniel lowered his rifle, his breath ragged. He turned to Elira. She stood tall, her face calm, but her eyes shining. "It's over," he said quietly. She nodded. "Yes, the war after the war is finished." In the days that followed, the coalition secured Torvan. The rebellion fractured, its members surrendering or fleeing into the farthest reaches of space. For the first time since the end of the Great War, true peace seemed possible. On Epsilon Prime, Daniel and Elira were welcomed as heroes. Crowds filled the streets, cheering as they walked side by side. Humans and aliens alike looked upon them and saw a symbol, not conqueror and captive, but protector and leader, united. In the Grand Hall of the Coalition, Commander Livia Chen addressed them. "Sergeant Daniel Cross, Princess Elira, you have done what no army could achieve. You ended the rebellion not with destruction but with unity. The galaxy owes you both." Daniel bowed his head, uncomfortable with the praise. But Elira stepped forward, her voice steady. "We did not win alone. We won together, human and zealot, side by side. Let this be the beginning of a new era, not of war, but of trust." The hall erupted in applause. That night, Daniel and Elira stood once more on the balcony overlooking the city. The stars shone brightly, unmarred by smoke or fire. "You know," Daniel said quietly, "when this started, I never thought we'd come this far. I thought you'd always see me as just another human soldier." Elira looked at him, her expression soft. "And I thought you would always see me as a burden. But we were both wrong." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, guess we were." For a moment, they stood in silence, the night breeze brushing against them. Then Elira spoke again, her voice carrying the weight of truth. "The galaxy is still broken, but if we stand together, perhaps we can heal it." Daniel nodded. "Then we'll stand together, no matter what comes." The stars stretched endless above them, a canvas of hope after so much pain. And for the first time in years, both human and alien could look toward the future, not with fear but with the promise of a new dawn.